Good morning. I'm Harley Schlanger from the LaRouche Organization with your daily video update for November 1st, 2022. Today I'm going to give you a report on the doings of the evildoers and why it's necessary now that we act to bring down their temples of doom. And by that I'm referring to especially the think tanks that are heavily funded by aspects of the military-industrial complex, the coordinated cartels centered around the City of London and Wall Street, which have been pushing a war narrative to defend their bankrupt financial system, which is now threatened by their own idiocy, as well as the emergence of a potential for new financial architecture worldwide. Now, tensions are continuing to escalate. You had the drone attack on the Russian naval vessels in Sevastopol. And you had immediately after this, the Russians announcing that they're going to shut down the shipment of grain from the port because of the violation of the Safe Channel Agreement that was reached and signed by Ukraine. And while Russia did that, Tony Blinken came out and attacked Russia for weaponizing food shipments, when in fact it was the Ukrainian attack, which the Russians said they have evidence was aided by the British, which caused them to make that decision. You also have the coalescence of the Warhawks in both parties in the United States, crazier than ever as the midterm elections approach. Democrats can't really rally behind the weak figurehead of Joe Biden, but they're sending out Barack Obama to rally the troops, only to see his ego deflated by an effective intervention by LaRouche activists in Detroit. And meanwhile, Lindsey Graham and Rubio among the Republicans are continuing to push various scenarios for expanding war. Now, for those who are still holding Putin responsible for this, I want to present to you a review from Helga Zepp-LaRouche yesterday on the Warhawks at various think tanks. Now, in this, she started with an article in Foreign Affairs, which is the publication of the Council on Foreign Relations. The headline is, "Could America win a new world war? What it would take to defeat both Russia and China." And it goes on to say that Russia and China jointly are a great threat since their alliance, and that it was a big mistake for the United States in 2015 to abandon their long-standing policy to prepare to fight two major wars. This led to aging military equipment, and other bad results. So now the U.S. has to shift back to a situation to be prepared to fight and win a two-front war. And they say this requires a major buildup. It's going to require a lot of manufacturing to be boosted, aircraft carriers to be built, better aircraft to put on them, and so on. So it's a complete call for a military mobilization to prepare for World War III. And where does this come from? The Council on Foreign Relations, which is funded largely by defense contractors and corporate cartels that make up the war party. And I would recommend that people take a look at this. It's in the October 27th issue of the Foreign Affairs. Now, Helga also cited an article by Caitlin Johnstone about the media pundits pushing for World War III. And she writes, "It should disturb everyone in the nuclear age that writers at influential publications frame the rise of a multipolar world as something that must inevitably bring on unmistakable violence and human suffering." She then reviews some of the articles that are being printed. She mentions the Foreign Affairs article. Then Josh Rogan in the Washington Post, who has an article, quote, "The skeptics are wrong. The U.S. can confront both China and Russia," unquote. Bloomberg's Hal Brand, who has an article, "Can the U.S. take on China, Iran, and Russia all at once?" and argues that more advanced military equipment must be prepared, including working with Israel and providing them advanced weapons as an ally in this. Then in Foreign Policy magazine, you have the Atlantic Council's Matthew Kroenig, who has an article, International Relations Theory Suggests Great Power War is Coming, unquote. Article in the New Yorker, what if we're already fighting the Third World War with Russia? And then someone named Robert Farley has an article, could the U.S. military fight Russia and China at the same time? Now, it's not a coincidence that this spate of articles is appearing, because that, in fact, is the strategy of the financial oligarchs and their retainers in government positions, in the intelligence community, and in media, that in order to preserve the so-called rules-based order, which means a global banker's dictatorship, in order to preserve that, we must be prepared to defeat any nation which refuses to submit to the rules-based order, which intends to defend their sovereignty against the unipolar nut cases running the West. Now, how bad is this? Well, here's an example. German Chancellor Scholz is having a trip to China, where he's promoting Chinese-German manufacturing and trade relations. He's under extensive attack as selling out to the Chinese. Well, the Germans have already sold out to the EU and the City of London by going along with the war in Ukraine, and now they're being told they have to give up the markets in China. This is a sign of the absolute loss of reality that governs the transatlantic elite today. Another example, the Finland Prime Minister Marin said that she does not rule out nuclear weapons or permanent NATO bases in Finland, which would put them on the border with Russia. Again, another provocation. Or the unhinged interview given by Christine Lagarde, the former head of the International Monetary Fund, who's now the head of the European Central Bank. She's talking about the problems for Europe, and she said, it's the energy crisis caused by Putin. She called Putin a, quote, sick, terrifying person with flashing, freezing eyes. She said he has to be driven by evil forces. Perhaps she was looking in the mirror when she saw that. No reference from Lagarde to the effects of the quantitative easing policy that's been followed by both sides on the transatlantic, which is the main cause of inflation because it's coupled with the deindustrialization policy of the Green New Deal. That's not mentioned, nor does she bring up energy speculation as a cause of inflation. Well, these are the sacred cows of the City of London and Wall Street. And to protect those sacred cows, you have to be willing to risk an annihilation of the whole planet in nuclear war. Now, there are a couple signs of sanity in Europe. One is from Berlusconi, who's the head of the Forza Italia, which is a coalition partner in the new government. Berlusconi said to convince Kiev to agree to talks with Moscow, they must be told there'll be no more military aid, that is, cut off the shipment of weapons, but in return offer a large reconstruction fund. Will the Ukrainians accept that? Well, Zelensky, it's unlikely, will accept it unless the rest of the West gets behind such an agreement. Now, the second sign in Europe is a growing protest movement. Large demonstration in Prague, continued demonstrations all over Europe as the continent is faced with the consequences of the bad decisions made by their leaders. Now, what explains such insanity? Well, there is evil and corruption. There's no question about that, but I'm not going to dwell on that now because we've covered that repeatedly. But there's another aspect, which is why does the population accept it? Now, there's a new study that was just released by the Institute for Family Studies, and it reports on the amount of screen time that the average 11 to 18-year-old has per week. They say 70 hours per week spent on computers, tablets, and smartphones. That doesn't even include television. That is 10 hours a day, 70 hours a week. What are the most common activities? Gaming, texting, social media, video chat, and online shopping. And then they point out, not surprisingly, there's a correlation between the amount of screen time and the feelings of depression in young people, loneliness, lack of sleep, negative body image, all of which are directly a result of the amount of time they're spending with their computers and their screens. Now, at the same time, you have for adults the phenomena of the mass media. While many people have tuned it out, those who watch it are the ones who comment on these on my updates in support of the NATO war policy, because they buy the line from London and Wall Street and people like Lagarde and others. The point here is that they're victims of hybrid warfare. And one form of hybrid warfare is the attempt to control the intelligence and the information that gets out to the population. We saw something very interesting with the number of views on my updates last week. After averaging over 30,000 a day on Facebook from the previous 3 weeks, last Thursday and Friday, for an unexplained reason, the number of views fell below 10,000 each day. Now, yesterday it was back up to almost 50,000. I would encourage people, if you want to defeat these evildoers, share our videos. Get your friends involved with the LaRouche organization. Have discussions, have a debate, force the issue, the same way our young people are doing with the so-called progressive Democrats and Barack Obama. Speaking truth to power is the most effective way of deflating the egos of the so-called elites and showing people around them that they're nothing but blowhards who are puppets on the strings held by the global corporations. So share this video, help us build up our voice internationally, and I'll see you again tomorrow.